Okay, today I'm going to tie a leech pattern for you. What I also wanted to do is take you through a few steps of getting to a pattern that you like, and that it's not always a first try type thing, even if you've tied for a while. So let me take you through the stages of this. I fished the river the other day, and it was really hot out, sun was out, and I'm picking up rocks and saying, what are these things eating? And there wasn't much in the water except for some sow bugs, and of course some little midge larvae, and but there was a lot of leeches, and these leeches were purple and brown and red mixed. That's the best way I can describe it, and they were about 1.5 inches long. And I just found them under almost every rock I picked up. So I thought, okay, when I get home, I'm going to tie one of them on these tough days and see if I can drift and swing one of these and catch some fish. So I got home and I started messing around with some patterns, and I came up with this one first. After I had picked the color that I wanted, which in this case is going to be the semi-sealed dub in Yukon brown. And my lighting's not the best, but this is, I would say it has some reds, greens, browns, purples, all in this little dubbing mix here. So the first one I came up with here, I thought I liked it, and then I thought, wow, look how thick that body is. Look how thick the dubbing is and how much is in there. And I thought, not only is that going to trap a lot of air, and I didn't feel that it would sink well or represent the pattern well. I thought it felt too thick, too bulky. And I'm going with the Marabou Tail. We'll get into more of that later. So I thought to myself, you know what, let's slim that down a little bit. Let's take a little bit of the dubbing out and go a little bit thinner on that, okay? So as a quick test, I tie another one. This one's obviously much sparser. A couple things that I learned in this one as I zoom in. Not only did I not cover the lead wire wraps, or the fake lead wire wraps, with the wine-colored thread that I'll be using closely enough, this one was just a bit too sparse. It honestly would probably catch fish if I shaped it and would have had a little bit more on the front end here, but I just wanted to kind of just gauge what I'm doing here. And so that was the second pattern I tied, and I said obviously a little bit too naked there, and I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. So the finishing pattern that I came up with was this one, I believe, yes. So it looks a little thick, but what I did was I palmered my dubbing loop through, and I made sure to cover every single bit of that underwire with this wine-colored thread so that it would have an underbody color of this wine deep red color. And then when this gets combed back, when it gets wet, it's gonna sleek down. It's gonna get a much better shape, that teardrop shape, and then I'm gonna have some wiggle here in that Marabou Tail. So I just wanted to point that out real quick, that when we post videos and things like that it's not always a first try thing. I try not to do too much editing, if any, so that it's kind of live, but you do need to practice because each fly is a little different. So this is the fly I'm going to be tying today, and I hope you like it. So hook and the vise, this is a mustad. This one is a size 10. So the hook itself is about 1 inch long. Okay. I'm going to be using this wine-colored uni thread. And I'm going to start at the eye and lay a base down with close to touching wraps. You can be as patient as you'd like to. This is a 6/0 thread, so that I can cover a little bit more ground because it's a larger fly. Okay, I'm going to take that down to the point. Then I'm going to grab some lead-free round wire to add some weight to this fly. This is 0.20, and I'm going to take off about 3 inches of that. And the reason I lay the base here is so that this wire doesn't spin on metal to metal. The base really holds it from turning a lot better. You can even do a little dab of super glue if you want. I've got a little thing of Zap-A-Gap here and a brush. Most of the time you can get away without it because you'll see how many wraps I actually end up putting on this thing, but I'll put a little light coat of super glue in there just to really reinforce it. I'm going to start back here above the hook point, and with touching turns, I'm not counting them, I'm letting the length of the hook see how much I can get on here. I'm going to stop just about an eye length back, maybe just a little more to give myself room for the head. Okay, so I think that's going to be about good. I'm going to pop that off, crease this down with my finger now, very good. And then again, forget my fingers, pop that off, make sure that's creased down. Okay, there's my lead on. I'm going to build some on the back here, just a little ramp. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come through in wide crossing, just medium tension turns. Okay, then I'm going to come back in wide crossing, medium tension turns. So if you were to see this, you can kind of see some X's in there. And that's what I want, so that when I go to cover this lead now, I'm going to be pulling those thread wraps down in there and kind of locking them all together. Okay, so that's what I'm going for. So let's take this back. Let me get you back out here just a touch. Good. All right. And then I'm going to go ahead and work on just really covering this up and getting shape in the front and the back. And depending on the thread you use, a flat thread would cover this faster. But I didn't have a flat thread in a color that I really wanted. And I wanted this underbody color, so I don't mind being a little bit patient and getting a little bit covered there. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but really get that covered well, okay? Because I'm going to be going back up it again anyway. So the next thing we're going to do is go for the Marabou Tail. So I'm going to come back down the shank to the start of the bend here, and I'm going to show you how I put together the tail. Okay, so I have grabbed 3 plumes of marabou, a purple, a black, and a brown. And I want the majority of this to be the blended brown. But I also want some black to darken it up a little bit, and then this purple, I'm just going to put a couple little streaks in there. So just to show you, I'm just going to literally grab maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4. That was more than I wanted to, but that can tie another fly. So there's my little bit of purple. I'm not going to use that much in the tail. Set that plume to the side. I'm also going to grab some black, a little bit more. Set that to the side. And then the brown is the most I want. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a little bit of a tuft here and snip off a couple inches of brown. And set that to the side. Okay, now that I've got all 3 colors here, what I want is to lay a base layer of this brown. So I'm going to slide these up and kind of out of the way, but leave them so you can see them. But I'm going to start with this brown, and I only want a couple plumes of this purple. All I want it is to just blend that kind of purpley bloody color in just a tiny bit when it gets wet, and that's really it. Then I'm going to go with a little bit of black over the top of that. Maybe one more purple, maybe two. And then I'm going to go with another chunk of brown there. Oops. It's a little messier when you're trying to do it on camera, but I'm going to lay this out. And like so. I've stacked myself a small little composite loop type thing, like if you were making a dubbing twist. So I'm carefully going to pick this up, squeezing it, pinching it. And I've got this. Now, I'll see you at the fly. Okay, so I've got my mixed plume of Marabou here, and I'm ready to tie it on. So what I'm going to do is I've got the butt sections here. I'm going to trim those off right up to the nubs of my fingers, and then I'm going to do a pinch and loop to catch these in. And I want those butts to go right up basically to the back of the lead body to make it even out. So pinch, loop and lock, do it again, loop and lock, pull, and one more for good luck. Okay, so I've locked the tail in there. It's right at the back of the hook shank. Now what I want to do is help prevent this marabou tail from fouling the hook. So I'm going to just make a wrap or two underneath and then pull straight forward like this to lock it up and kind of kick it up a little bit. And then one back over onto that shank. And I'm going to come back again to the back, go underneath one more time, pull straight forward towards the hook eye, and then up and lock. And there's tension at all times in that, okay? So now I'm going to go ahead and finish tying this in and clean up a little bit so that we have a fairly even underbody. And now is when I want to make sure that I've got, you know, over 90% coverage of my lead wire. And flat thread covers lead wire well, but I didn't have it in this color. And also I kind of like the round thread for gripping, and just I like to tie with it just a little bit better personally. Okay, there you go. I've got a nicely covered fly. Now I want the tail to be the length of the shank, so I'm simply going to fold it over, splay it out like this, and then use my thumb nail against my finger and pinch it off. Just like so. If you get a little bit longer on the bottom, you can pop those off, no problem. And there's our tail. Okay, purple will show through in different areas. The whole goal of the purple and the black and the brown mix is for me to make just this kind of blended color that is kind of a brownish, purpley, you know, a wine type color. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to come back and create a dubbing loop. Okay, I'm going to pull out 6 inches of thread, lay my finger on top, come back up to the hook shank, go over it twice. Now I'm going to lap my thread over the dubbing loop itself to close the open V. Okay, so now the little V at the bottom is closed. Alright, I'm going to run my thread back up for the final time, catching any more that are kind of sitting there. Alright, now for the dubbing, I'm just going to thin out my little dubbing pinch here, making it somewhat wide. I'm going to slide it into the dubbing loop there. And I'm going to do the same thing a few different times. You can put some wax on your thread if you struggle with this. Sometimes I do. But if you're lucky, you can just tuck it in, and it touching itself acts like Velcro. Alright. Now I'm going to go ahead and pinch that thread down to close the loop, just like this with my fingers. And I'm going to remove my finger and slide in my dubbing loop tool, which in my case I'm just using a little shepherd's hook here with a weighted bottom. So I'll attach that. Now I can let go as I pull this tight, and you can see I've got a nice little dubbing brush there. Okay, now it's time to spin. And I'll try to hold it up and just do it by hand like this for you so you can see how this works. Alright, coming together nicely. Once you get it spun up a decent amount, you're going to want to just kind of go through and lightly, not too firm, but lightly pull out any fibers that aren't caught in there real well. See how I'm getting some out? And I'll just stick that back in my pile for the next fly. You can also get a small bit of a Velcro or comb or toothbrush with stiff bristles, anything like that. There we go. That's what I've got. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and wrap on the dubbing loop by preening back the fibers, starting weaving my way back to where the tail starts. And every turn I'm going to palmer forward and not do touching turns because I want this leech to be kind of sparse with the dubbing. And I'm going to just keep moving forward. And just keep pulling those back towards the tail. And once I get up near the head, I'm going to go ahead and just finish this loop off, basically, because the head of a leech is kind of a little round thing with a sucker on the end of it. Alright, so now I'm going to cross and tie off my loop again, and maybe a couple in front just to lock it, and trim away the dubbing loop. Okay, that's looking good. Just preen these dubbing fibers back, and let's clear up this eye and build up a little head. So as we build up this head, I want to try and tuck back and catch as many of the fibers as I can. Not only does this help with setting head cement, but it helps by not clogging your eye of your hook when you're trying to put your leader through it or tippet material. So I'm just going to build the head just a tad bit bigger back here and taper it down just a little. I'm going to spin it back kind of flat, and then if I can do this without, this is what we got. And then we're going to do our whip finish. One wrap in front of the other after I make this figure 4. I'm going to lay it alongside the fly and go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that one's case because I wanted to cover down the whole head. Pull it nice and tight. Now what I'm going to do is before I clip this, I'm going to hold this thread tight and just grab my Velcro one last time and just brush back these fibers. Catch back a lot of the stuff that's got trapped down as you were wrapping up through. Very good, very good. I don't really want too many fibers to be back behind the tail. Let me zoom back out for you now. So anything that's, that's fine. I'd just fish that. But if it starts to bug you, you can just come back and trim those the same length like so. Okay. Now we're ready to trim off the thread. Coat of head cement here. I'll be performing a couple coats actually. So once that first one dries, keep your eye clear. I'll put another coat on there, and just so it gives a little shine. And if I back up just a little bit, I can show you the finished product. So that's what I wanted. If I stand these up, you can see it's actually not too thick, that dubbing. You can see the body through it and the color. And that's what I was going for. And so when this gets wet and streamlined, I'll have action in the tail, and then hopefully this color matches what I've been looking for. So, and I'm just going to keep experimenting. I mean, you can imagine the dubbing types and color combinations there's no limit to those. So that is Leech pattern.